are talking about Return of the Slasher Nurse, possibly the most on-the-nose title of a movie ever. Now this one is directed and co-written by David Kerr and follows the 2017 movie Curse of the Slasher Nun, which I have not seen. So I'm not quite sure when this one is out. Do not have a release date for this one as of yet, but I would assume at some point in 2019. So this is a super micro budget slasher movie. David Kerr, obviously a fan of the splatter slasher flicks of the 80s. The budget for this was around £10,000 according to IMDb, or should I say dollars there. And obviously about a killer nun, I'm assuming from the same one from the first movie, one would assume. And this follows two characters really. We have this young girl and this kind of biker dude as they are attempting to find their missing siblings who, you know, who have gone missing, potentially murdered by this this slasher nun. And it follows these two kind of going around and doing kind of illegal things, quite frankly, to try and find out clues about what's happening. In the meantime, we have this kind of like this masked slasher nurse, along with her sister, going around cutting a swathe through the local populace. So let's talk about this movie. So it's obviously a micro low budget film, so we have to kind of base it on that kind of level of movie. So what works with this film first of all? So I have to say I was impressed with the inventiveness of the gore and the effects here. Now it's obviously a low budget affair, so you know, think kind of Peter Jackson's, you know, early films, really kind of along the lines of I've forgotten what it's called now, Bad Taste, that sort of thing. Maybe not quite to the level of that, but that kind of like, you know, super kind of like OTT gore that's actually kind of a little bit of fun at the same time. You know, we've got people's kind of the tops of their heads getting sliced out and they're kind of like brain bulging out, decapitations, bullets to the head, loads of stuff. And then the body count's kind of relatively high here with this one. So lots of kind of killing, lots of boobs. Many a lady here sheds her clothing for your viewing pleasure. So if you like lots of gore, lots of boobs, then this one that maybe has that in spades for you. I actually quite liked the look of this this slasher nun. Reminds me a little bit of the nuns from the Silent Hill video game. I suspect by design. And I did get a kind of I mean, there's kind of, we see some kind of like videotapes of when they were young and stuff, and you get this kind of like Michael Myers, almost like a female kind of Michael Myers vibe, where she's, you know, institutionalized and all this kind of stuff, and has these kind of violent tendencies, but is actually maybe has some kind of intelligence, although she's pretty much, you know, a stoic kind of character. So there's all that, and there is an attempt here to kind of flesh out the story, having this kind of like these sort of two characters, like two kind of main characters, go through some sort of trials and tribulations about trying to find out what's happening here. There's also some attempts at comedy. A couple of jokes did make me chuckle, I will admit. So you know, so it's kind of a somewhat of a horror comedy to a certain degree, because obviously its tongue is in its cheek. But there are a few jokes, yeah, but it is kind of a little bit, the humour isn't going to be for everyone, is what I'm trying to get at here. So where do I feel this movie maybe lacks? Now again, we will judge it on the kind of the basis of a kind of a low budget indie movie, so we're not looking at this as in a kind of like comparison to the same way I would look at a blockbuster. But that being said, I do feel there's some stuff here that I would point out. So this movie is way too long, like considerably too long. The screener I had was about 1 hour and 20 minutes, but there were some trailers at the beginning and a kind of the credits. But when you just look at the actual film itself, you're probably looking around the kind of 2 hour mark. And this needed to have about 30 minutes cut out of it easily. Maybe even a little bit more, because it's way too long. And the movie needed to be a lot more punchy in regards to its kind of like its pacing. Some of the scenes just drag out for far longer than need be. And part of this is because they're trying to set up jokes. For example, we have this the nun's first victims in this movie, I think, are this kind of like a group of cultists who are all out there kind of doing culty things in the middle of the woods, and then she kind of turns up, but they have this kind of joke that's kind of like running between these cultists, going on for about 5 minutes. And I think if these aren't main characters, this is just cannon fodder. But they're spending all this time here with this kind of gag, this guy who's trying to kind of like ask this girl out. And yeah, it's just stuff like that. It's just way padding out the running time. There's a little bit too much kind of like running back and forth, and you know, we'll talk to this character, then we'll find somewhere, we'll go to this character, going A to B. So the running time needed to be a lot more concise to make this movie a bit more enjoyable, because it starts to feel like a bit of a chore because of the pacing is a little off. On the technical side of stuff, some of the scenes are quite underlit. I found now obviously some of these are taking place in the dark, so you expect it to be kind of obviously in the dark, but you know, as the recent episode of Game of Thrones discovered, you basically still have to kind of be able to see, and despite the fact that it might take away from some of the realism, you know, we kind of want to see what's going on. There are a few scenes here that are actually quite badly underlit. Now the acting, these are not professional actors, so the acting is as you would expect from kind of like amateur actors. That's kind of all we'll sort of say on it. Yeah, I mean, some of the kind of like the technical aspects in regards to some of the kind of, for example, the sound mixing again, just a little bit kind of like lo-fi. One of the things, and this might be a little bit nitpick for me, although I like the gore and the kind of the effects I found were quite inventive. This will sound kind of hard when I explain it. I didn't feel the violence was quite as brutal as I would expect. So what I mean by this is when we see our kills, the attacks just don't look like there's enough force behind them. Now I know that is because our actors, who are not professional actors, are trying not to actually wallop the other person and stuff like that. But because of that, when we see our kind of like our action sequences where people are having motions of chopping or stabbing and stuff, they just seem a little bit too gentle, if that makes sense. So we never really get a sense of impact when things are happening. Now the gore is fun, and when we see that, obviously the effects and stuff, but the motions of the violence towards the people just seem a little bit too restrained, and that's obviously because when these are not professional actors, and I'm assuming stuntmen and things like that, and obviously a very, very low budget, so they're kind of, the actions look like a low budget affair to me. So again, we'll go back to the humour now. Like I've said, some of these jokes for me I found a little bit, you know, somewhat funny, but humour's a funny thing. You've got to kind of be, if you're mixing humour into a comedy, you're kind of diluting those who want like a pure horror film, and because humour is so subjective, if your jokes don't hit, then you kind of are alienating that crowd. And otherwise, well, I feel some of them are fun. Some of them are a bit over long, and they're kind of like yeah, and some of them are just plain silly. I also didn't understand why we have a lot of bad wigs in this movie. There's many characters who have bad wigs, and clearly David Kerr is a fan of bikers. There's lots of kind of like biker types in this movie. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a low budget schlocky affair. I think if you're a fan of the kind of the low budget horror genre, it's worth a watch purely for kind of like the low budget schlocky goodness that you're going to kind of get from it. I do, for the biggest thing for me is going to, this needs to be at least 30 minutes shorter for me, for my money, because that's the biggest critique I would say, to make it certainly a more watchable movie. And I know I appreciate people have worked hard to make scenes and stuff, but this is my outside perspective. So yeah, I mean, overall it's kind of you know, a bit of fun, very kind of niche market, I would say. This, if you're looking at from a mainstream kind of like a movie-going experience, I'd say like about 4 out of 10 to be honest. But certainly if you are a fan of the kind of the B-movie kind of schlocky horror films, then this is certainly maybe one you want to check out, of which I know there are quite a few that subscribe to this channel. So have you seen this? I mean, I don't think it's out yet, but has anyone seen it? Please leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.